This week's Parsha is Parshas VaYigash, which also coincides with today having been Teves. And Parshas VaYigash is really the story about taking back control of our lives from being just kind of drifting around and getting caught up in our momentary lost stray thoughts and saying, you know what? I see how far I sank down over here. I see how I've got myself trapped in what is an impossible situation. And I am just going to say to God Almighty, I want out. I want to now take back the ability to choose what's right, because we never give up our free choice. We never give up our ability to do the right things. But sometimes we forget about that momentarily, and we start making other choices because we misunderstand the size of what we think is the obstacles. We think that there's opposition. We think that there's difficulties, and we start to take into account and make these things our ruling authority, and we lose sight of God Almighty. But then there comes a time when we have to wake up and realize, no, 1 second, I am not going to play this game anymore. I have built in within me a godly soul that has the ability and the power to overcome every single obstacle, no matter what it is, under any circumstances, at any time, at any place. There's never a place in time, there's never an opponent that has the ability to overcome my godly soul. And that's what we see in the Parsha of VaYigash, because the brothers, after having descended deeper and deeper into the traps that Yosef laid for them, thinking that every moment, if only they would just comply more and please him and do what he asked and so forth, that they would somehow it would just all work out. They realized, they came to a crushing defeat in realizing that no, there was no way out. And in fact, they were completely trapped now. They were completely trapped in a situation that was completely impossible, untenable. And the only way forward was to really stand up and speak directly to Yosef HaTzadik, which they didn't know who that was him. They thought he was the viceroy of Egypt. But Yehuda, the quintessential Jew, the word Yehudi comes from the name Yehuda, which means the willingness to stand up against any form of concealment of godliness. He was willing to stand up and just set the record straight to the rulership of Egypt. And this took tremendous bravery, but that's what's built into all of us. And he just had to come to that point where it was brought out of him, and he now did it. And he spoke up to Yosef and to Joseph in such a way of strong strength. I was speaking how unjust and cruel Joseph's actions were, and that it was not permissible, and it should not be conducted that way. And the Egyptian government should not condone these behaviors, and the Egyptian government should not conduct itself this way. So the lesson from this is, as Rebbe explains in a sikha, that really this is the job of the Jewish people in relationship to the nations of the world and the non-Jews in the world. Our job is to speak up and say, no, this is not how the world is supposed to be conducted. You are harming the inhabitants of the world. You governments are harming. You're being cruel to your own people. You're being cruel not just to the Jewish people, being cruel to every single human being. And this is not only that we have this obligation to do this, but the Rebbe explains that the nations of the world are yearning for the Jewish people to do this, because they're lost in their own chaos. Egypt was lost in its own chaos and its own stray thinking and its stray behaviors. And therefore, Yehuda, in standing up, was not just doing a favor for himself and his brother and his brothers and his father. He was doing a favor for the entire Egyptian people. He was setting the king of Egypt straight as to how to properly conduct himself, how to properly act in God's world and in alignment with God's vision for the world. And this is a lesson that we must learn. We must now jump out of our seats and stand up and speak to everyone and say, no, this is not proper for the government to conduct itself this way. This is improper. This cruelty is unacceptable. With the tone of voice, with the certainty and the authority that Yehuda spoke to Joseph, his brother, but thinking that it was the king, the vice king of Egypt. So that then brings around an entire change in our circumstances. It brings around the redemption from that trap. All the traps that we find ourselves when we have this attitude and we speak with these strengths. And this is exactly the power and the lesson of Teves, the day on which the federal court ruled that the Svarim, the holy books, belong to the Chassidim and not to the Rebbe's family personally, but rather the Rebbe represents he really himself belongs to the Chassidim, and all his possessions belong to the Chassidim. So, and the Rebbe collected these holy books on the intention that they belong to the Chassidim, to the Jewish people as a whole, and to really as an inheritance for all of humanity, the wisdom of the Torah, the wisdom of the energy of expansion, of moving out into the world. And that's why the Rebbe emphasized that in Teves it's important to add to our collection of holy books, because it's essential for us to be in a mode of expansion, bring into our homes and into our lives more teachings of expansion. When we're facing the cult of scarcity, that is teaching about scarcity and teaching about lack and teaching about constricting and reducing this and reducing the human footprint and reducing the number of human beings, God forbid, reducing the number of children, God forbid. Our job is to look into the holy books and say, we are going to take action. We are going to increase the human footprint. We are going to increase the human population by doing our part and encouraging others to do their part, and raising our children to do their part, to bring more beautiful and wonderful human beings into the world. This is our job. And the whole point of learning the story of Teves and celebrating it is not to tell a historical event, it's to bring into our own lives the Nesinas Kayach, the power of expansion, the power of setting the record straight, the power of speaking up, the power of being able to go forth into the world and to say what the truth is without any fear whatsoever, and to be successful in accomplishing that without any fear. And that expansion, our personal energy of expansion is contagious, and it is contagious and it causes other people to expand, and they expand spiritually, and they expand physically, expand their capability of their hearts to take care of and love other people, the ability to bring more human beings into the world, more children into the world. This is the greatest blessing of all. This is what the intention of the miraculous victory of Dida Neitzach of this day is, that we celebrate. And together with the lesson of VaYigash and the Yehuda and his strength, we can proclaim to the entire world that the time of redemption has come. And we don't have to now continue with the false ideologies and the false philosophies and the false darknesses that have been taught since the beginning of humanity, to lead humanity astray into thinking that humanity is alone here in the world and has no one taking care of them, and therefore has to make do on their own by all kinds of defensive measures and protections and calculations and constrictions and scarcity mentality. No, on the contrary, we are not meant to make these calculations, because we're living in God's world. We're living in a world of abundance that God is telling us, go forth and expand, be fruitful and multiply, conquer the entire world, bring it to the best use for humanity and for the service of God. That is our intention in the world. That is God's intention for us in this world. And when we accomplish that, we bring blessing to our lives. We bring blessing to every human being's life. We help them exit the exile that has gone on far too long. And we bring about the voice of truth, the revelation of the truth, when every human being will see with their own fleshy eyes that there's nothing but God Almighty. And may we experience that right now. A good Shabbos and a good Yom Tov.